Let me know when to start.
We're now live on Facebook.
Okay, brilliant. Shall we start? Right. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Erica Chisanga. I'm chair for the Black and Asian Minority Ethnic Network here at Cambridge University Hospital. And today we've got the pleasure of having Rohan Sivanandan, who is our new non-executive director. Now, just a brief introduction about Rohan, and this is to say Rohan has been in the organization. He was appointed to his role in the summer. His experience incorporates a diversity of senior roles in health and social care, education and judiciary, and spans the public, private and voluntary sectors, including extensive experience in non-executive director, governance and trustee roles. Rohan has dealt with recruitment, disciplinary and workforce development. Rohan, you're probably thinking, oh gosh, they're talking about all of these things about me. Equality and diversity and inclusion agenda is something that Rohan has always had an interest in, given the environment he grew up in, and he has a depth of lived experience when it comes to lack of inclusion. I'll let Rohan unpack some of that for us. But I would also like to add here that a majority of staff, myself included, do not get the opportunity to meet our non-executive director. And I think it is a great opportunity to do so, and most importantly, have a platform to ask questions about how Rohan, in his particular non-executive role, will support our organization with our EDI agenda. My interactions with Rohan so far clearly identifies his humility to recognize that all people start from different places and has the desire to give all people the opportunity to be equal. And I emphasize the all here. This will be an interactive session, and without me preempting too much, I will let Rohan introduce himself, and we can take questions from attendees, both from the chat box and when you have been unmuted to ask verbally. So over to you, Rohan. If you tell us about, so that you can tell us about your professional journey that has led you to Cambridge University Hospital. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Erica. That's an introduction that already leaves me a lot to live up to, I think. So, folks, I'm not able to see. I can just see names of participants. I know we've got a dozen or so people here. So, I wanted to say right from the offset, from my point of view, this is as much, if not more so, an opportunity for me to hear from you and learn from you and see what's on top for you and see what the issues are for you, because you have the benefit of having been in the organisation for far longer than me. I think, hang on, 1st of August, that means August, September, almost 11 weeks I've been in, although it feels longer in the best possible way. So I don't intend to bore you too much with a kind of a detailed trip through my CV, although I'll touch on various things. But at any point, I would welcome people kind of butting in and asking questions and saying, what do you mean by that? Or can you tell us about that? Or actually, I have a point to make. So let's really make it as interactive as possible. Where do I start? I don't know. I guess one of my earliest memories around this issue of EDI was maybe as a young teenager, just becoming aware, and part of my awareness was fueled by my father, who did a lot of work in the field of race, class, and politics. But becoming aware that there were lots of black kids, my contemporaries, being excluded from school, and wondering why. And that actually led me to, I think it was about 13 or 14, volunteering at a Saturday school for black kids. I live in London, and this was in London, in a fairly rundown black area of London, volunteering in a Saturday school to do whatever was needed. And that evolved into a role that was both pastoral in terms of having just conversations with my peer group, with black kids who have been excluded, but also doing some teaching, which kind of prefaced probably a significant part of the career that I followed in education subsequently. So I think right from the off, long before I had even formulated any kind of intellectual understanding about what's fair and just, I had a visceral and intuitive understanding, or if not understanding, just the sense of what was fair and just and what was unfair and unjust. And I knew that I wanted to be part of addressing that. And, you know, I felt that, like a lot of families that made the journey, I was born in Sri Lanka, made the long boat journey, and, you know, 5 of us lived in one room, in a rundown part of London when we first arrived. I say that only because I think that I've been privileged to have access to education, and along with that intuitive feeling that I've just talked about, and that gut feeling that injustice should play no part in our society, I also feel that I have a responsibility as someone who's had access to education and been able to follow a professional career, to pay something back to those who have been less fortunate, who are more disadvantaged, who are voiceless. I consider it both a responsibility and a privilege to give those who are voiceless a conduit, if you like, to provide that conduit for those voices to be heard. So that's the most important part, I think, of telling you how I've landed at CUH and nominally carrying an EDI brief. And I say nominally because my determination and intention is that EDI for me is simple. It's about how we treat people. It's how we treat people. That's what it boils down to. It's about human beings treating every human being as a human being, irrespective of anything. And you know, we can bring in all the protected characteristics, but it's as simple as that for me. Obviously, it becomes more complex in the application, in how we all end up living our lives, but that's what it comes down to. So I am determined that this is an agenda that I will not be the person that's responsible at board level to carry. At board level, I want everyone to carry it. At executive level, I want everyone to carry it. At staff level, I want every single person to own it, and hopefully, if they need to learn, to recognize how they can contribute to this, because the contribution to the EDI agenda is just a contribution to humanity. And I think every single one of us have a responsibility, and I include the patients in that too. So it cuts both ways. So I don't intend to be, oh, well, it's EDI, let's ask Rohan. There's going to be a big pushback from me on that. But I should also probably just say, offer a reflection of what I found. And if I said this elsewhere. Those of you who've heard it before or a version of it before, excuse me. So, you know, being interviewed for this job, as an interviewee, all of you know, as an interviewee, you are at a disadvantage. You are in a less powerful position than the people sitting on the other side of the interview table, by definition. But part of that equation for me is also me trying to assess, both at that time in that pressure situation, but immediately afterwards, if I'm successful, is this an organization that works for me? That question is as important to me as anything else. And I describe it thus. The organizations, and I work for many currently, and I've worked for many in the past, but mine is one of those portfolio careers, if you like. So probably, you know, a lot of different things in a lot of different sectors, as Erica has mentioned. But walking into an organization, I say, if the door is slightly ajar, and I mean in relation to who I am, what I bring, what I offer, the perspectives that I bring, if it's slightly ajar, that's good enough for me. If it's closed, but there's a sign on the door saying welcome, that's good enough for me too. And in fact, that's probably the default position. I have to say, I'm waiting to come across an organization where the door is wide open, but I live in hope. But if I come to an organization where the door is closed and it's locked, and I see that sign, which my parents saw when we came to this country, which says no blacks, no Irish, no dogs, I'm at the point where a little bit of common sense has finally prevailed. And I say, you know what, this is not a place for me. This is not a place that I want to do battle. I don't want to start at a -0 point. And I turn around and walk away. And I say this because my sense at the interview and in the 11 weeks since I've been at Cambridge and immersed myself quite heavily in what's going on in terms of the board. And I think I've just finished, I think I saw Ian Walker's here, and Ian's been my go-to person right from the beginning, and I'm very glad of that. But he may be able to confirm that I've had probably 25, it feels close to 30 one-to-ones in the last 11 weeks, which has been fantastic, but exhausting, alongside all the board meetings. But again, the reason I say that is that I don't think there's any one of those one-to-one meetings where I haven't walked out feeling encouraged that door is open, that people are open and willing, and they may not be able, but at least they're open to ideas or different ways of doing things, or to challenges, or to whatever is going to come down the road on this agenda. So that's probably a very different kind of perspective on what people might have been expected from me, having a wander through my professional career. I can come back to various things about how I've got here. But possibly it's important for me to say I don't come from an NHS background. So in terms of that alone, I had a vertical learning curve. That's not an oxymoron. Can you have a vertical learning curve? Anyway, discuss. I have a lot to learn in terms of the NHS. My background in the NHS is only in the last decade or so in a very particular area of mental health, where I chair mental health panels for patients who are detained in mental health institutions, and we have to make decisions on whether they should continue to be detained or discharged. But I do a number of other board roles and across judiciary, health, social care, and education. So I mention that only because I hope part of what I'm bringing as a supplement to my ignorance in terms of NHS arena is perspectives that I can bring from outside. And I'm very keen. I've observed a lot of different boards before I came to CUH within the NHS and in other sectors. And one of the things that I've noticed, particularly in the NHS, that it's very easy to get NHS groupthink. It's very easy to get even the most sharp and liberal brains can very quickly get inured into thinking in a particular narrow track way, which is prescribed by all the things NHS. And I think that's not necessarily true of a lot of the NEDs who bring an amazing amount of varied experience from different fields. But B, I think also I'm hoping that my experience in sectors outside the NHS will help to add different perspectives and different ways of looking at things. I think that's all I want to say now. I think I've already said too much, Erica. So I haven't been able to look at the chat while I've been speaking, but I don't know if there are any questions that have come up. Let me just pause there.
Yes, there have been some questions that have come up. So we'll start with the one that has come from comms here, from our comms team. And it's a question about how, as a comms team, they can, how can they equip all staff to challenge racism when they see it?
So sorry, I missed the beginning of that. Did you say this is from the comms team, Erica?
Yes, this is from the comms team, and they're asking that how can they equip staff, all staff, to challenge racism when they see it?
If I didn't say it at the beginning, I'll say it now. So it's perfectly right that you should ask the questions that you ask. But actually, what I'm really wanting to find out is what all of you think. So my answer to that question is to say, whoever asked that question, what do you think? What are your challenges? What are you facing as barriers? What do you think needs to be unblocked? So whoever asked that question, that's back at you.
Right, someone from comms. Have we got Ali on the line, or anybody who's been working in comms for a while who can take this question?
I will ask the question back at them. Leave it with me.
Okay. Thank
You'll
you.
ask the question back at them. So while we are waiting for that answer, I have, and I think this question is from Emil. And Emil, you can correct me if you're not the one, because it doesn't show who the person who has asked the question is. And it says, what was it that what made you choose to work with CUH? Is there anything in particular that caught your eye?
Good question. I'll try and wander into the answer. So I'll share a story. I'll share a story with you. So one of the trusts for whom I work as a mental health manager, and as I think I said, I've done that role for a number of trusts over the last decade or so. When a lot of my colleagues a decade ago, or people colleagues in the trust or outside, were saying, why don't you go for one of these NED roles? You'd be, you'd be good in that kind of role. So I took myself off to a board meeting of one of the trusts that I work for, and I sat in the board meeting on the periphery as a member of the public, and I gradually slipped down my chair as they waded through 3 feet deep of documents, and I thought, absolutely not. I can't think of anything I'd like to do less than be an NHS board member. So this was about 8 or 10 years ago. And then as time went on, and I picked up a few other board roles which weren't NHS, but where, if you like, the context and the arena in which those organisations working were of great interest to me, I came back and revisited the NHS board role, and I looked first at mental health trusts because I had that connection with the work I was doing in mental health. And I think I applied for one mental health trust role, was interviewed, didn't get it, and it was in London, which is where I live. And then a couple of roles came up at the same time. I'd been intermittently keeping my eye out, and in fact, the direct answer to your question is someone sent me the CUH job and said, you might want to have a look at this. And I looked at that, and I looked at a small community trust and NED role at the same time. And both had an appeal for completely opposite reasons. Here was a large acute hospital, nationally, internationally renowned, and in contrast, a very small community hospital quite close to where I lived, Cambridge being a bit further away, obviously. And initially, all I could do was read what was in the brief. And then, as you would expect, I did a lot of background reading. So I went into, CQC reports, annual reports, all of those things to really inform myself about what feel I could get of the organisation. And I guess it comes back to the thing that I told you about, and I have to sense check this at all stages. So the sense I got before I applied is this door, certainly on the equality, on the EDI front, which was a main focus of this NED role, this door feels like it's ajar, it's open, it's slightly open. And let me just go and have a look. So the combination of what CUH was in a complete contrast to the other community role, which incidentally I was also offered, but particularly that sense the door was open was what I got, and I knew that was reinforced at interview, and this has been reinforced in the 11 weeks I've been here. And I hope there's no one else from the Ian, block your ears for a moment. Just to say, I am very clear. I am, I've traveled this road a long time in terms of what's around the EDI agenda. I'm very clear that at any point that I feel that door starts closing, I'll start kicking up stink. And if it shuts and the welcome sign disappears, see you later. I'm not, I will make it known what I think and what I feel, and if I feel that we're not progressing as we should, but I won't be hanging around to be bashed and battered because I'm wearing an EDI hat for the board and not being able or being prevented from or not supported in helping to deliver that agenda. So Ian, you can unblock your ears now. Not that you could have actually done that. I find this very weird, folks, that
that you can't see the folk.
I can't see the folks. I find it very disorientating. I didn't realise that this is the way this was going to be conducted. I want to see if people are going, oh my God, why did we take this person on, and disappearing under the table, or if they're laughing or if they're crying. I'd like to see reactions, but anyway, that's not in my gift. So are people able to show themselves Judith, are people able to make themselves visible? I can see Tracy.
I can see Tracy's coming on, and shall I, with the answer that you just gave there, I'll just follow it on. It just makes a natural progression into Tracy's question.
Yeah,
which
I was thinking,
what are your personal objectives and things that you want to achieve for yourself in the role?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's important, because obviously it's clear, Rohan, that you don't have a traditional sense of the way you're applying yourself to the role, and I think that's really, really interesting from your background, and explicitly because you're not a staunch NHS. So you know, it'd be really, really interesting, I think, for myself certainly, and the people listening, just to get a sense of, you know, what your hopes are, what you really want to achieve out of this role, because it's obviously a new opportunity and a new way of applying your amazing background and skill set. So really interesting to hear what you have to say on that.
And are you, just to be clear, are you asking about me for me or me for the organisation?
Both, actually. I think it would be interesting to hear. So if your personal view, and then for the organisation. And then the back of that, Rohan, I've kind of got two questions in one. Hold that thought. The other thing I wanted to ask you was, given that you're so new to the organisation, I think it was 11 weeks you quoted that you'd been in post. I'd be really interested to get from you a sense of where you feel we are on the race equality journey. So just obviously you haven't got any of the baggage, you haven't been here, you know, for ages and a day. Just as a new person coming in the level that you are in the organisation, I'd be really keen to hear of your take on where you think we are in terms of race equality. And I'll shut up now.
Okay.
Yeah. Again, Ian must, you know, shut his ears.
I trust Ian. So let me take the last question first. Where we are. I'll illustrate my answer with an example. So in talking to a member of staff, and I can't honestly remember who it was. So I came up to do a walk around and a visit and a walk around, and I was shown around both by Ian, thanks Ian, and Amanda, whose surname I forget, but she's the deputy chief nurse. And that was very enlightening, as have been the one-to-one conversations. But something that I heard recently, which I still am waiting to see the follow-up and get a response on, was someone told me that, and I think it was a recent episode, there was a Filipino nurse on the phone to a patient, and I'll commute the detail of the example, but the patient was basically saying, "Where are you from? Why don't you speak proper English? Why don't you speak Queen's English?" And the Filipino nurse became very distressed. I don't know how that conversation finished, but the nurse's distress was at least supported by staff around. I don't even know if it was a him or a her after the event. And what immediately came to mind was, what are the policies and procedures in place that allow that Filipino nurse to actually say, "Sorry, sir, you can't speak to me like this. It's unacceptable, and I'm now going to disconnect this call." Because that's what I would want that person to be enabled to do. Not only to know that it's okay to do that, but own it. So not just know it in theory. So I don't know what the policy is. I don't know the extent to which that person, if the policy exists, and I still don't know that, would feel, would actually know about the existence of that policy. And I don't know the extent to which that person would feel enabled to act out that, whether they'd feel they have the confidence to actually take that position. but so I don't know the answer to any of those questions, and I've referred this back up. I'm waiting for a response, but I wasn't quite clear where that response was going to come from. But in a way, for me, that shows to me with one very small example where we are or where we're not in terms of race equality. Because again, as I said, I think earlier, for me, this is about equality stuff. You know, we can give it all the labels that we like, and EDI, equal opportunities, race equality, this, that, and the other. We've had so many labels over the last at least 3 decades in which I've been involved in this, maybe more. But ultimately, it boils down to how we treat each other. Was that behaviour acceptable by the patient? Absolutely not. Why should anybody have to be spoken to like that? And why is it incumbent on a professional member of NHS staff to feel that there's an extra responsibility on them to allow someone to speak to them like that? Why? It shouldn't happen. It shouldn't be acceptable. So I'm waiting for a response back on what we've got in place, the extent to which people know about it, the extent to which people feel enabled to then, once they know, act out in that way. Because for me, that's completely unacceptable. So that doesn't answer your question in the broader sense, but I think it answers it in a very specific and particular sense, and it boils it down to the most simple detail of what equality is about for me. It's not about big policies and big strategies, and you know, I'm not decrying Black History Month, but all the things that we do that illustrate that we're doing something. It is about how we treat each other, and that treatment is unacceptable. So that was, I hope that speaks to your question, Tracy, about where we are on race equality. You know, and then you can extrapolate that out and say, well, if that's happening to one person in one part of the organisation, how much could that be replicated all over the place in different ways, in different contexts for different people?
I think that's absolutely fantastic, Rohan, what you've just said, and obviously that's very close to all of our hearts. And I think what I was getting from that as a sense was just empowerment as well. So inclusion, but from a sense of empowerment, you know, you have permission to, like you say that's not right, and you don't have the right to be able to speak to me like that, and do something about it. And I think we've got some work to do around that. As you said, you escalated and you're waiting for a response, but there's some work to do. Emil, you want to come in here?
Can I just take that a little bit? Emil has actually answered that we do have those processes on violence and aggression management policy. And shall I let you take it further, Emil, on how
Emil, speak to me.
How we are making people aware where these policies are and how they can bring them to life.
I think that there are challenges because given my role, I tend to get staff contacting ourselves to have a understanding on how to deal with difficult patients or patients.
Sorry, Emil, to interrupt you. Remind me what your role is.
Oh, sorry, I do apologise. I'm a PALS case manager.
Okay.
Yes. So we deal with a lot of complaints and concerns raised against things across the trust. So as in the role, fundamentally, we tend to inform staff to use, review or go back to the violence and aggression policy, which in itself has got incivility, which comes into that bracket of when someone speaks to you in a manner which is unacceptable, aggressive or rude, you have the authority and the right to advise them that you can terminate the call if they persist. So, but it's about educating the staff, and that's where that's I must say is the flaw at the moment. We haven't educated staff to be much more aware of this policy and empowerment of saying, you know what, it's not acceptable. Zero tolerance. I'm not going to allow you to talk to me in that way. And I think that's where we are at the moment. But it is there as a trust. We have a policy in place. It's how we implement it and get it circulated to all staff to utilize it effectively.
Thanks, Emil. I think that's really important, connecting back to what Tracy said. It is about empowerment. You know, large organizations, bureaucracies necessarily have lots of policies and procedures in place. But taking this topic, it's the ownership of those for all the individuals that's really important. And on this particular topic, as Tracy said, it's about empowerment. It's not only knowing about them, but being able to own them, and then rehearsing for each person how you deal with it. Because you take that situation, and Emil, I'm sure you've come across this, another person might have quite justifiably taken absolute umbrage at that treatment and said, you must be joking, and slammed the phone down and reacted in a way that's perfectly justified by the provocation, but in which that person then becomes the subject of what has gone wrong. You know, take it back to what I said about excluded black kids. The amount of times when I taught in schools where I saw the underlying message to a black kid having undertones that they would react to, which wouldn't be seen by the recipient teacher. And then not the teacher would be the problem, the black kid would be the problem. And so I translate that just to this situation too. So that thing about knowing, owning, empowerment, it goes back to also something, Erica, that we talked about 3 or 4 weeks ago when we met. You know, there are areas, and they may be simple or not, here's an area of CPD that can be done fairly quickly and fairly effectively and make a difference to everybody's life in the organisation. So I don't know what's going on in the CPD landscape, either generally or around EDI. I know there's, you know, COVID has had an impact on everything that we do and how we do it. But I would be saying, here's something, here's a quick win. You know, it has to be rolled out, but someone with a great deal of expertise around delivering something, these can be bite-sized sessions that can be delivered through team conversations about the policy, how you own it, how you act out, what's the protocol to follow, how you report it up, etc. So going back to your earlier question, Tracy, about achievement, here's one achievement I'd like to see. I'd like to see that no member of staff, I don't care where they're from, gets spoken to in that way by a patient. And if a patient starts speaking like that, then there is a very quick cut-off point that everyone knows, which is, and going back to your term, Emil, zero tolerance for that kind of treatment. And, you know, much as I don't expect it to be the case at CUH, I can say that I've experienced it even as a non-exec in other organisations. That applies staff to staff civility as well, not just patient to staff. So this speaks back, Tracy, to one of you talked about personal and organisational ambition. That's an ambition, a simple one, but coming out of this, that's a simple ambition.
And Rohan, thank you so much for that answer. It's just so important, because this again links back into staff empowerment in terms of the bullying and harassment policies and processes that we have in place. As you mentioned, large organisations, we have a whole fleet of policies and practices that, you know, technically we can rely upon for staff safety, to ensure all these assurances are in place. But the reality is, actually, staff know about them, but they're not empowered to be able to use them and to rely upon them and trust in the outcome. So thank you very much, Rohan, for what you said. I think it's amazing. Thank you.
Thank you. And can I just add there, sorry to cut you, Rohan, in tandem with that, and I can see in the comments here, in tandem with the empowering of staff, there's also a very big piece about educating patients about how they should conduct themselves or behave towards staff when they come to utilize the services, because it's all well and good to empower staff on one hand, but if it's like a supply and demand, isn't it? If patients are not educated about how they're expected to behave when they come into hospital, fair enough, there'll be the few whose behavior will be out of their control, but a majority of them have got volition. So they need to be educated to know that these are the expectations in terms of behavior towards staff. Yeah, okay.
The only thing, thanks, Erica, is absolutely correct. I completely endorse that. I just wanted to tie this back to the earlier question, because I don't think we had the challenge I put back to the comms team. I don't know that I had a response back. I'll stand to be corrected, but it occurs to me when I'm trying to join all the dots that this conversation that we've just had also speaks to what the comms team can do, because if this message hasn't got out to everybody in a way that they own it, then that's a job for the comms team as well. So I don't mean just, oh, they know there's a policy over there about disrespectful treatment. Comms has to be bigger than that for me. It has to do a job that facilitates right up to the point where maybe some training comes in. So I just wanted to connect it back to the topic that we've been talking about, and obliquely respond to the question we got about what can comms do. But I'm not prepared to respond any greater until I get the response back.
The response. Okay. Okay, so while we're still waiting for the response, Emil, would you, now that you've been allowed to come onto the screen, Judith has kindly made you visible to Rohan. You've got two beautiful questions there. Would you like to verbalize them yourself? Emil?
Yeah, just coming off mute. All right.
Okay.
I've just lost the questions I put there, but I will. When you first started your introduction, you mentioned about your path to where you've led yourself to, and my question was on a general scale was that there are several experiences or people who've gone through, hit a glass ceiling with regards to their career or opportunity to progress. And there's so many obstacles they meet where they can't go any beyond that point, especially as a BAME person. What advice would you give with regards to that glass ceiling and how to break that glass ceiling?
Well, let me say, as I answer, I'm picking the shards of glass out of my hair from that ceiling. And every morning I wake up, they're still lying on the pillow. So that never goes away. I don't know that I would give advice. I can share with you a bit of what my journey has been. So I think your other question, I think I briefly saw it was around something about interviews as well, wasn't it?
Yes.
So those two things might tie together. So I've been turned down from more jobs than I can, I don't know what the phrase would be, but and the sense I've got in a lot of the jobs that I've been interviewed for, if I've got as far as interview and been turned down from, is that the cut of my jib doesn't fit. So I don't fit in the minds of the people sitting on the other side of the table, the profile of who they want. And there are two ways to approach that. One is to prepare and be willing to put on the suit that you know will fit the people on the other side of the interview table. And lots of people do that. Lots of people choose to do that. And lots of black people, people of color choose to do that. That's okay. That's their choice. My choice has always been, I will never compromise who I am. I will never compromise my authenticity. I will never wear that suit. I'll wear my clothes and I will present who I am and what I offer. And if that is not good enough, that's okay. Disappointment, yes. Constant disappointment, yes. Regular disappointment, yes. I think I have currently about 9 different roles in my portfolio career, some in as non-exec, some in regulation, some with a couple of government departments. But all of those have been hard won, as has every other thing that I've ever done in my career. And my career, there have been distinct phases. So very briefly, I did a couple of degrees in economics and worked as an economist in private industry before I realized that value set that I'd recognized as a teenager working in a black kids Saturday school didn't fit with the environment I was in the private sector. And although I was on a path to becoming the chief executive of the organization I worked for, I chucked it and went and trained as a teacher. And even then, I made the decision, instead of going into middle management and administration, I wanted to learn at the chalk face. So I went and trained as a teacher and started as a basic teacher and ended up running an education authority. But my career, such that it is, I would describe, is a career by default, not by designation. So the default has always been, in most organizations I've worked in, right from the get-go, even in my first job in a school, I would turn up to staff meetings and they'd be discussing something. And my focus in schools would be on the pupils, the learners, and then the teachers. And I'd say, well, hang on, you say this is the way we're doing things, but surely if we did this, it would be better for the learners and the pupils. And the answer would come back, but that's not the way we've always done it. And I would say, and your point is what? So I think my natural tendency is to go from the people that I'm there to serve and say, what is the best way we can do that? And then challenge the status quo by saying, why can't we do something different? And here's the suggestion. And when that suggestion, as it often has been, or suggestions have been pushed back, and it's kind of the organization, it's like the computer says no, we can't do that because we can't do it because that's not the way we've done it for the last 10 years or 50 years, or in the judiciary for the last 500 years. So we can't change. But if you want to try it, you go ahead. So I would go and try it, and I'd get to the point where I'd be convinced that what I was trying was better for the learners. And if that couldn't be accepted by the organization, then I'd move to somewhere where I thought it could be accepted. So my career has almost been by default by challenging the status quo, and then if the organisation is not willing to at least be open to change, it goes back to that door being open. Then okay, I want to use whatever I have to offer to its fullest extent, to try and make a difference. And if the organisation limits that ambition, then I will move on. So I don't, if I stand back, non-exec director at CUH sounds a grand title. For me, it's just, again, a replication of what I just said. I happen to have applied. I'm privileged to have been appointed. I have to say, and I said this to our chair, so Ian, you don't have to block your ears for this. And I said it to Roland, the chief exec, when I had my one-to-ones. Pre-Black Lives Matter, I'm not sure that a couple of the roles that I've got in the last 18 or 20 months, I'm fairly certain I wouldn't have got them. So if George Floyd and Black Lives Matter and all of that stuff has made a difference, I know it's at the forefront of a lot of organizations' agenda now, and that might produce very little. But there has been a tweak in my experience of people's thinking about, if I go back to the interview table, the interviewers thinking, well, perhaps this person's suit, it doesn't quite fit with what we thought we wanted, but maybe it does. Shall we give them a chance? So I think there's been that slight tweak in consciousness, not universally, but certainly in certain organizations and in certain sectors. But and I put Cambridge aside, CUH aside, because I don't know for a fact. But in general, I don't think that I would have been the person selected for this role 18 months ago or 20 months ago. So I say that simply in terms of acknowledging and maybe one of the almost invisible positives of the BLM agenda. And long may that continue. I know Erica had in her back pocket something about the ICS, and I was just looking the other day. So I don't know if any of you have come across the CCOL group. The CCOL group was set up a few years ago, particularly for BAME NEDs in the NHS. So it's a support group, and it's a campaigning group as well. So it's through that vehicle and just looking online, I've seen that out of I think it's 42 ICSs are coming down the road. The chairs, I think currently we've got 5 BAME chairs of ICSs. I can tell you now, not a chance in hell that would have happened to you. Not a chance. Now, my personal view, there is an element of poison chalice to this role, because until the government bring it in on the 1st of April, and even then and for a long time thereafter, it's really unclear what that role is going to play out as, and it's going to be an incredibly tough and rocky road. But just simply on the fact that we've got 5 at the moment, I think it's 5 or 6, I can't remember, out of those 42, as I say, not a chance that would have happened 2 years ago.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rohan. I am, in the interest of time, I can see we've only got 4 minutes. I just want to underscore what you may have not, you probably were aware that it was a nugget that you were sharing with everyone here, whether they're from BME background or not. the importance of authenticity, because yes, you can be invited to an interview and dress in the suit that is going to suit the people that you're going who are going to interview you. And if they give you the job, you can only pretend to be someone for so long before you default back to your authentic self. And when you do, you then find that I'm actually not comfortable in this organization. I'm not talking about CUH, any organization that you have successfully been appointed to. And that increases the rate of attrition for a lot of people, because you went in pretending to be something or somebody that you're not. And it's important, it's therefore important going forward that when we do go for these roles, we take our authentic self there, so that when we are appointed, people know that this is what we're bringing to the table, and you are not going to default back to something else, because the authentic self is the thing that you presented at interview. Yeah, so that's a really, really important. Thank you so much for that.
Can I just add one comment on that? The other part of that I think I said was, there are many people of colour that, precisely because, Emil, of that glass ceiling you've talked about, have decided that it's more important to be inauthentic in order to get the job that they're doing. And I can't condemn that, because I understand it. But in fact, what happens then is that they become part of the problem and not part of the solution.
Yeah.
So I think that's the other bit of what you were just saying, Erica. I think it's important to say that. I'll hand back to you.
Right.
Can I just say something just before we go? I think it's important. What I did take from what you responded to my question was, which I find sad, is that when we go for an interview, or we're in a job and we're not being accepted or being able to progress, the choice is to move away, leave that organization, which I've done. That's a fact in my career. I've left the organization and progressed elsewhere, where I feel I've invested time and energy in an organization where that opportunity can be given within that organization. But it's never, because I've hit that glass ceiling, I cannot move further. So I choose to go elsewhere to achieve that progression. And that's the sad part of
Can I just yeah, it is the sad part. And I just want to correct, maybe ameliorate that sadness by saying there are many organizations where I've stayed, rolled up my sleeves and fought to the back teeth to make sure that what I bring and the investment that I make actually makes a difference. There are very few battles that I've walked away from. So I kind of described it more glibly than is the case.
Yeah.
But we have to recognise that quite often that's at our cost. If we're staying, that cost is ours. But it is sad. But it's a sad reality, I think. But I live in hope.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Thank
now,
you.
just before we close, we have had a response from comms here. Rohan, here's the response from comms team on how all staff can challenge racism. I think having some statements in our mind that starts the conversation in a non-confrontational way would help. For example, did you realize that what you said was racist? Also, whoever was writing said, I think it's often people are scared of saying the wrong thing, and having a culture where we can be open and discuss what is and isn't acceptable, something that we've discussed already. Acceptable language would really, really help. Right. Rohan, thank you so much. And
sorry, Erica.
Have you got any last things that you would like to mention before we wrap up?
Yeah, I didn't. I don't know if I heard you correctly. Did the comment say that something that I said was racist?
No.
Oh, right. Okay.
No,
Then I
no,
misheard
no,
what
no,
you said.
no. Yeah,
Okay.
no, I
So,
said it was an example from comms that if we had statements that would say something like, did you realize that what you said was racist? For example, if a
right.
patient,
Okay.
if any service user comes into the organization and we approach their, their non-acceptable behavior with a statement that's non-confrontational.
So I'd like to say one thing more as we go just on that. I think those conversations are the most important learning opportunities for all staff. So something I've done at CAFCAS, where I sit on the board, but I have the EDI lead board, is to initiate conversations just by using a very short video clip and just playing it to a group of you and saying, what do you think? And that starts the conversation. And out of that, things come up. And the ground rules are, be as ignorant as you want. Ignorance is welcome. So I mean it, because if people can't feel comfortable, if they feel they've got to be politically correct and know all the answers before they can display their ignorance, we're not going to get anywhere. So be ignorant, ask questions. Everybody has to be prepared to be insulted in those things if it happens as an accident. Literally, you set the ground rules, because unless you do that, you'll be excluding lots of people. And that's something that I'm really keen to get going at CUH, the kind of clumsy conversations piece happening at all levels through the organization, from top to bottom, bottom to top. I'll shut up now because I know we've gone past time, but
yeah, that's fantastic, and it's been a pleasure to have you. I'll also like to mention that I think Annesley's on the line today. Some of the work that we're doing in the background, which is about diverse interview panels. We are running programs for training so that people who are going as the diverse interview panelists are able to challenge some of these clumsy conversations that can happen, especially within an interview setting. Yeah. So hopefully, yes, there is a lot of work to do, but I think we are on. I believe we are on to an upward trajectory with all the people that are on this webinar. The reason they chose to come onto this webinar is because they're interested in what race issues we may have within the organization. So everybody who logged in, thank you so much. And I thank people in advance who are going to listen to this webinar much later on. Thank you so much, Rohan. And it's been a pleasure to have you.
Pleasure was mine, and I want to thank everyone that came along and gave up their time to me to hear me rabbiting on about stuff. So I hope to get the chance to meet you individually over the coming months and do some work with you. Just sit down and have a cup of coffee with you. So yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.